Well, they did make it a little bit too interesting there at the end of the game, but other than that, this was a fantastic game from the Kraken, one of their best of the season, and a bit of redemption from how they played, especially the end of their last road game in Edmonton. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken win in regulation in Vancouver 4-3, handing Vancouver their first regulation loss of the season, which leaves just one team still waiting for that first home regulation loss. Of course, that would be the same team as last year, who the Kraken also handed that first loss to in the Boston Bruins. And once again for the Kraken, this now does make it back-to-back wins for them for just the second time this season, but at least this time they didn't have to go to overtime to do it, and they don't blow a multi-goal lead, though they still did make it pretty interesting in the last few seconds. And of course for the Kraken, it's been a pretty exciting few days even aside from the two wins, as between those two yesterday, their Winter Classic jerseys got leaked on Instagram by, of all teams, the Utah Jazz of the NBA. Either way, we'll be getting to that later on in the video, as I promised in my first ever short, and for what that's worth, boy, if you thought I was bad at keeping things short with these videos, yeah, limiting it to 1 minute is definitely difficult. Either way, we'll be getting to that a little bit later on, probably after the Kraken 3 stars. Honestly, I was expecting to do it here early on in the video, but this game definitely deserves center stage. So with no changes in the Kraken lineup, we might as well jump right into the game, and right off the bat, the Kraken get off to a hot start. Bjorkstrand gets a good shot on goal. It was still one that was probably an easy save for Demko, but it was good to see the Kraken coming out shooting early on. And not long after that, Dunn gets a very good look from in the slot that Demko does have to come up with a much better save on to keep that one out. But eventually, a few minutes later, Vancouver's able to press back, and they are the ones that end up breaking the ice first. It's a shot that comes from well out. The Grubauer is able to make the save on, but it leaks between his glove hand and pad out into the blue paint behind him, where JT Miller's the first one to get to it and shovels it backhand into the wide open net. But before he does, Borgen gets back and saves it, shoveling it back into Grubauer, and it's no goal on the ice. The Kraken dodge a massive bullet. Or at least so we thought, as it ends up going to replay, which is clearly the right decision. It was very, very close. And on replay, it takes them a while, but eventually they come back with the decision to overturn it and call it a good goal on the ice, apparently seeing a sliver of white there, which, again, the puck needs to go all the way across the line to be a goal. Apparently they saw that little bit of white ice between the red line and that puck to call it a good goal before Borgen could shuffle it out of the net. And to be perfectly honest, I still have not seen a replay where I see that sliver of white. It is still close enough. I mean, the puck it's right edge to edge between that line and the last edge of the puck. To me, that seems like enough where it would be hard to overturn it to a good goal. If it had been called a good goal on the ice, then yeah, you're definitely not overturning it the other way either. That having been said, I'm not going to get too deep into this because, for one, it doesn't end up being the difference in the game, and for another, well, the replays that Root showed at least were not necessarily the most conclusive ever. And besides, from what I've seen, and this isn't to say that general fan opinion has never been wrong before, but even neutral fans were saying that they thought this was a good goal. So again, it doesn't end up being the difference. And I'm willing to say that, yeah, they must have seen something on that replay that we didn't see on the TV broadcast, at least the Root Sports version anyway. From there, the rest of the first period is pretty back and forth between these two teams. Generally, I would say a pretty well played first period either way. The Kraken end up getting one power play that never really goes much of anywhere. So we get to the end of one with the Kraken maybe having a slight edge. I think they had one more shot on goal than the Canucks, but even at that, we're kind of splitting hairs. And after all, the Canucks do have the 1-0 lead, which for the Kraken is not an ideal place to be in, as their second periods, generally speaking, over the course of the season so far have been shaky at best. I mean, they've had a couple of good ones, but generally it has not been their strength, to say the least. Meanwhile, for the Canucks, they very well may be the best team in the NHL in specifically the second period, and again, have been the second best home team in the NHL. So being down one, again, not really where the Kraken want to be at going into this period. That having been said, you still have to play the 20 minutes. And play them the Kraken did, looking fantastic really throughout this second period, jumping on offensive opportunities and not allowing much back the other way, really locking things down well at their end of the ice. And eventually, a few minutes into the period, it pays off for the Kraken as the Canucks go for a bad and pretty late change, especially in a second period where the benches are farther away from the end of the ice that you're defending. That makes a big difference. And it gives the Kraken here an odd man chance as Beniers gets the puck into the offensive end, waits for a little bit to find a trailing Alexiak right down the wide open middle of the ice in the offensive end. Alexiak has all the time to wind up and fire off a bomb that finds the top corner of the net, just glancing off the shoulder of Demko and tying the game at 1 for Oleksiak getting his first of the season. And for the first time this game, there's no doubt that this puck was in the net. And following the goal, the Kraken don't let up from there. The Canucks do get one partial shift in the offensive end, but they don't get much out of it as the Kraken, again, defensively really keeping things to the outside at that end. And then they're right back down the other way, eventually forcing Vancouver to take another penalty. And this time, unlike the one in the first period, the Kraken power play looks like that power play that's been red hot here over the last couple of weeks and just scored 3 times on 4 opportunities in the last game against the Islanders, as they spend the vast majority of this power play in the offensive end and getting, well, not a ton of chances on net, but they do create a good amount of pressure, and eventually it pays off as they get back into that offensive end for the last few seconds, get set up, cycle the puck a couple of times, and as the guy's exiting the box, Oliver Bjorkstrand fires off a shot from up high that deflects off of some sticks in front and then just disappears. But a couple seconds later, Eberle's looking down at the net from behind it, and the puck's in! The Kraken take the lead! It's 2-1, and technically a 5-on-5 goal. Actually, you know what this goal made me think of? As it disappeared between touching Eberle's stick and then sliding into the net behind Demko. It made me think of, for those of you, and I know this isn't going to necessarily hit home for everybody, but for those that played the backyard baseball games, especially from the late 90s to early 2000s, I don't know if this is still a thing or if they're even making backyard baseballs anymore, but they used to have the specialty pitches mixed in there that you could throw every now and then when the juice meter got high or whatever it was. There was the corkscrew pitch, there's the big curves that you could do. There was also the one that would just disappear and then reappear somewhere in the strike zone. And that's kind of what this goal felt like in a hockey version and live action for that matter. Did they make backyard hockey? I don't know if they made backyard hockey, but this would be the type of thing that I would expect them to put in like a backyard hockey where the puck just disappears in front of the net, and then the next thing you know, nobody seems to know where it is until it's sliding off the leg of Demko behind him into the net. Now, as it turns out, the shot from Bjorkstrand is deflected in front by Eberle's outstretched stick as he's kind of battling with, I think it was Hoglander in front of the net. Either way, the tip from Eberle goes down to the ice and right between the legs of Demko, where it kind of gets stuck, although Demko doesn't know where it is, so he does what every goaltender's trained to do when they don't know where the puck is, and retreats to his net. But what he doesn't know is that by doing that, he shovels the puck, which was stuck under one of his legs, into the net as it just keeps sliding when he stops at the goal line, and the Kraken get a bit of a lucky bounce and slide here to get this second goal of the game. Though with that having been said, it took us a little while to figure out this was going to be a goal in the first place, as it does end up going to official review as well for a potential high stick by Eberle. And I'll be perfectly honest, still frustrated with what I thought shouldn't have been a goal at that point in time with that first one in the game. I was convinced they were going to find a way to make sure that this wasn't a goal. In the end, though, they decide that the call on the ice stands as they at least didn't see enough to overturn it, and the Kraken do take that 2-1 lead. Unfortunately, it's a Kraken lead that would not end up lasting very long, as just a couple minutes later, there's a face-off in the Kraken end of the ice, and right off that face-off won by the Canucks, it's Quinn Hughes who fires off a shot and a nice screen out in front that has this one get past Grubauer over his far shoulder and into the top corner of the net. A really nice shot from Hughes from well out, and again, a good screen that just really didn't give Grubauer much of a chance. And so as a result, eventually, after both teams get a couple more chances, there's a couple more saves at either end of the ice. For the third game in a row for the Kraken, we get to the end of a second period with the score tied at 2. And you know what, at this point, to be perfectly honest, given how good the Canucks have been to this point in the season, especially at home, as well as where the Kraken themselves are at, I would have been perfectly happy regardless of what the outcome was, as long as the Kraken at least showed up for this third period and looked like they belonged. Yeah, I was still definitely hoping that they would pull it out, but as long as they played a full 60 minutes, I could have accepted a well-played loss. Fortunately, though, the Kraken not only played a full 60 minutes, but came into this third period finally looking like that team that had a bit of that desperation that we've been looking for after that slow start to the season, especially in the offensive end. And not the desperation where they're just throwing the puck around and hoping something sticks. You know, the kind of sloppy desperation that can really come back to bite a team. No, they looked like they really had a purpose and were throwing pucks at the net and throwing their bodies at the net as well. And as it would turn out, a few minutes into the third, that's what would end up making the difference. It's a frankly incredible shift from the gourd line here that gets into the offensive end, creates some pressure and some chaos and chances out in front of the net that eventually Demko's able to steer aside into the corner where Tolvanen's the first one on it, curling with the puck up along the boards, and then a beautiful pass threading a needle through the entire Vancouver defense, from the boards on one side to the boards on the other side, where Borgen has pinched down to the low face-off dot on that far side, and it doesn't take long for Borgen to find Yanni Gourde, who's gotten himself a bit lost out in front of the net. But just as Gourde is having his feet taken out from under him, he's able to get the blade of his stick on it and roof it into the net to give the Kraken the 3-2 lead. For Gourde, it's his third of the season, Tolvanen his 9th assist, and Borgen his 5th. And for the Kraken, they do not let up from here, continuing to get pressure on, and it doesn't take long for them to end up on the power play again, as Tanev was getting on a bit of a break, and from behind, JT Miller just goes full lumberjack, slashing him in the wrist, and sure enough, draws that slashing call. Weirdly, Miller seemed upset by the call, arguing it all the way to the box, which is nothing unusual, but this one, as he will eventually see on a replay if he watches it, was about as textbook of a slash as you're ever gonna see. Either way, the Kraken head to the power play, and the Canucks to their 3rd kill. But it's a power play that would not last very long, and not because the Kraken score. As they get into the offensive end, Yamamoto tries to put the puck around Pettersson, which he does, but then in trying to follow it, he grazes Pettersson's foot and gets called for tripping. And this was a pretty soft tripping call, but at the same time, you know that having given the Kraken 3 opportunities on the power play, the officials were going to look for something to at least make it look close. And sure enough, they get Yamamoto for this trip, so we go to 4-on-4 for most of 2 minutes. And that's a situation that you would not think would really favor the Kraken here, even aside from the fact that they were not particularly good at 4-on-4 last season. Typically, when you open up the ice by taking a couple guys off of it and you still have even strength, it tends to favor the team that can get the more offensive skill out on the ice. And with Vancouver having 3 of the top scorers in the entire NHL at this point in the season, yeah, you would think that would probably be the Canucks, especially considering they're also going to be pressing extra hard to try to equal things up here midway through the third. But with all that being said, you could have been fooled into thinking by watching it that it was the Kraken that had the clear advantage in this 4-on-4, as right off the bat, the face-off at the Kraken end, they get down to the Canucks end of the ice with a bit of a rush, and Larson gets a wide open chance on the far side of the net, right up against it, but Demko comes up with a huge save to rob Larson of his potential first of the season. The Kraken, though, were not going to take no for an answer, as they do have to regroup at their end of the ice, with the Canucks getting at least down into the Kraken end. They get a new line out there, it's the Beniers line, and right away they're back down into the Vancouver end, or at least dumping it in to go and chase it. It's Tyler Myers who gets to the puck down in the corner first, but he just makes a stupid decision to try and fling it around the boards behind the Vancouver net instead of getting clear possession of it, which is what you want in 4-on-4. And he doesn't see Eberle crashing behind him. Eberle steals that puck from Myers as Myers falls down, and in desperation, Myers takes Eberle's feet out from under him, as Eberle, from his knees, finds Matty Beniers crashing through the slot. Beniers takes one look at it and fires the shot, roofing it into the top corner to give the Kraken the 4-2 lead. Demko not given any chance here whatsoever by the turnover by Myers and subsequent incredible pass from the knees by Eberle. And for Beniers, with that perfect placement into the far top corner, he gets his 3rd of the season and 2nd in as many games. Also a 2-point game for Beniers, with the assist already on the Alexiak goal to open things up for Seattle. And yes, I did make extra sure to mention that it was Tyler Myers who set up this Beniers goal with his defensive bumble, as he's still probably public enemy number 1 in Seattle for his incredibly nasty, dirty hit in open ice that knocked Beniers out for a couple of games midway through last season. And again, it's Beniers who scores this goal. I suppose Makar's also up there with Myers for his hit in the playoffs on McCann. Either way, the two of them are clearly 1 and 2, and I would not be surprised if Kraken fans are letting Myers hear it when he and the Canucks come to Seattle here in a few days' time. Now, obviously, this is all well and good for the Kraken. It's often a good thing to have a multi-goal lead midway through a third period. It gives you a pretty good chance to win. But at the same time, the most concerning thing right now is that the Kraken have a 2-goal lead because of their propensity to this point in the season to cough those up, especially on the road, and especially considering that last game they played on the road, they coughed up a 2-goal lead in the last 7 minutes of the third and lost in overtime. So yeah, not necessarily feeling like this one is anywhere near over at this point, and certainly not feeling much better about it when a couple minutes later, the Canucks are going to get their first real power play of the game. They had a little sliver of one after the 4-on-4, but it's really not enough for them to do much of anything with. They are going to get the full 2 minutes this time. And especially considering, again, that uneasy feeling about the 2-goal lead, the fact the Canucks had the third best power play in the league coming into the game, and the Kraken's penalty kill has been struggling to say the least. Yeah, definitely a nerve-wracking 2 minutes. And although the Canucks did spend almost the entirety of it in the Kraken end of the ice, the Kraken do a fantastic job of killing it off, really keeping it almost entirely to the outside, and anytime the Canucks did try to fire a shot off, there's a Kraken player right in front of it to get a shot block, which turned out to be a pretty strong theme throughout the rest of this third period, as the Kraken really did kind of go into defense mode. Maybe it was the Canucks starting to show some desperation to try to get themselves back into this game, but the Kraken spent a good part of the rest of this game at their end of the ice and blocking shot after shot after shot. And actually, that's been something that's kind of flown under the radar about this Kraken team so far this season. They've really been pretty good at blocking shots at their end of the ice. Heck, Alexiak, who led the team with 4 shot blocks in this game, is currently tied for second in the NHL after tonight with Jacob Trouba, who's also not particularly popular in Seattle at the moment. But aside from that, Alexiak, just another stat that points out his fantastic defense to this point, and he's not alone. Larsson's in the top 20 in the NHL, and Tolvanen's been pretty fantastic on the forward end. And for that matter, I should probably mention, although his totals aren't as good because he doesn't spend as much time on the ice, Belmar, who missed a couple of games for the Kraken because of blocking shots. Anyway, that continues into the final couple of minutes when eventually the Canucks are able to get Demko pulled to get the 6-on-5, and again, they do spend a good amount of the 6-on-5 in the Kraken end of the ice, and one shot ends up getting through to the far side of Grubauer off of a tip and going off the chest of Alexiak and just a hair wide of the net. And I guarantee you, if we're talking early on in the season with the puck luck the Kraken were having then, this one's absolutely going into the net with still about a minute and a half left on the clock for the Canucks to find the net again and try to tie this to get it to overtime. Fortunately, though, it goes off Alexiak's chest and wide of the net. Heck, even last season, I think we actually saw one go off of Alexiak's chest and in the net, so it's not like it would have been the first time we'd seen it. The Kraken dodged that bullet, but when we get to the final few seconds, that puck luck does come back in. To be fair, again, that Eberle goal from earlier on in the game was a pretty lucky one, so the Kraken were maybe due, at least this game specifically, for a little bit of bad luck, and it certainly comes with 9 seconds left, or actually I think technically 10 is what they end up putting on the clock afterwards. It's a shot from up high that just bounces and dipsy doodles its way through a bunch of people and into the net. It's tipped out in front by Hoglander, and then off of the Hoglander tip, goes off the shin of Larsson, bouncing down off the ice, then up, then glancing off the glove of Grubauer and finding its way into that net. But regardless of how it ended up in the net, it's now 4-3, and I don't know what the Kraken did to the hockey gods to piss them off, but this random, lucky, multiple bouncing puck finds its way into the Kraken net to now give us 10 seconds of incredibly nerve-wracking hockey to have to watch. And I know it's a puck drop at center ice, and you should be able to pretty easily kill off 10 seconds to still win by a goal. But boy, oh boy, did the Kraken make those 10 seconds interesting as the Canucks win the faceoff, and within 4 seconds are into the Kraken offensive end and firing off a wide open shot that Grubauer is able to get a piece of to have that go wide. It goes out of play, and then with 4 seconds left, we have a face-off in the Kraken end. And of course, the Kraken lose that one too, so the Canucks get set up, get another shot off in those 4 seconds. Grubauer gets a piece of that one, and it goes wide, and we eventually get that clock to tick down to 0, so the Kraken can get this 4-3 regulation win and let out a huge sigh of relief. And based on some of the tones of the post-game interviews, yeah, I can say that there was some sighs of relief on that Kraken bench and out on the ice as that final second ticked off. So in the end for the Kraken again, even if they made it a little bit more interesting than we might have liked for those last few seconds, it's a huge win on the road against one of the best teams in the NHL to this point in the season, who again had yet to lose in regulation at home, so the Kraken hand them that loss and get those ever important 2 more points in the standings, now having gotten 5 of their last 6 potential points, even if the 6th one that they gave away in the Edmonton game is still incredibly frustrating. It's been a 2-0-1 run, which has been pretty good for them, and now they come home to face a Calgary team who they've already lost to, but should be able to beat, and then a San Jose team that honestly even the Coachella Valley Firebirds might have a chance against. Though of course, as always, and we've learned this from the previous game against the Flames and really both against the Oilers, that you don't count the points on the schedule until you've played the games. But it at least is a little stretch there that feels pretty good coming off of this huge win against a team that, well, let's face it, this was an upset. And it's an upset for the Kraken that they really did have to play a full 60-minute game to make happen. Sure, the Canucks made a couple of chances. It wasn't the cleanest game from Vancouver, but this wasn't a win for the Kraken that they got just because the Canucks didn't show up or anything like that. Again, the Canucks played pretty well at different points in all the periods, and although the Kraken were trying to create momentum, Vancouver was at least getting their chances to answer back the other way. For the Kraken, thanks to a combination of taking advantage of the opportunities given them and defensively really keeping things to the outside well and blocking a lot of the shots that came from the outside before they could even get to Grubauer in the first place, something that we saw them do very well and to great effect last season, but haven't seen a ton of, at least consistently this season. They're able to make this win happen, and yeah, it definitely feels good against a Vancouver team that has had a couple of upsets the other way in the short history of this matchup. So naturally then we have plenty of players to select from when it comes to the Kraken 3 stars, which as always are brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to be a part of deciding who gets the 3 stars after every Kraken game, you can support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching the video to this point, by going through the link down below to Patreon and supporting over there as well. And as far as the 3 stars are concerned, I'm not going to disagree with the patrons on the first 2 at the very least. Beniers is certainly one of them. I'm going to give him the first star, a goal and an assist, and a very important goal for the Kraken. It ends up being the game decider, a beautiful shot off of that feed from Eberle, and generally just a really well played game by Beniers. He had a couple of other opportunities as well. He's had better games in the defensive end, but really nothing bad there. So for Beniers, I would say the first star, and it's also really nice just to see Beniers finally starting to get a little bit of that confidence back and contributing offensively like we knew he would do eventually, even with that slow start to the season. The second star, though, and I could see the argument here for the first, would be Eberle. He has a goal and 2 assists, and really the only reason that I'm picking Beniers over him is that Eberle's goal was a little bit of some witchcraft involved there, so Beniers was just a nice shot. Eberle gets a bit more some puck luck to get his in. Either way, a fantastic game from Eberle all around. He does have that from the knees feed to Beniers to set up Beniers' goal, so yeah, Eberle, great contributions all around the ice. And then I am going to go against the flow of what Patreon wanted. They're going to go Grubauer. I think honorable mention is definitely worthy of Grubauer. The first goal is ultimately kind of on Grubauer. It's a save that he really should have and be able to freeze without letting it leak past him. Again, that didn't end up making the difference in the game, and he was good and made some big saves later on. So not saying it was a bad game from him by any means, but I do feel like Jamie Oleksiak is absolutely deserving of a star, if not just for his performance in this game, which was fantastic. Obviously, his first goal of the season, and I already said, a team leading 4 blocks. But I mean, he's just kind of been overdue for another star with how he's been playing defensively for this team. I mean, genuinely, he might be their best defensive defenseman to this point in the season. Larsson's right there as well, but it's been a fantastic start to the season defensively from Oleksiak. And even for that matter, he's generated more offensively than his stats would suggest. And finally, now that we've gotten through the Kraken 3 stars and going over this, once again, fantastic full 60-minute upset win in Vancouver over the Canucks for the Kraken. We still have to spend a little bit of time on that leak of the Winter Classic jerseys for the Kraken, shown by the Utah Jazz the day before, and then apparently later on AEW, so it's pretty much all but confirmed that these are the winter jerseys now that we've seen. And I will say that my honest original impression of them was that they were kind of just okay. I mean, I liked them, but it felt like something was kind of missing. Almost that it was a little bit too blank and too much empty space with the big barber pole stripes. And I think part of that is probably that these are likely blanks and we just didn't see the numbers. They'll probably have numbers on the sleeve. Not sure with the retro look, maybe they don't go numbers on sleeves, but we'll certainly see the numbers on the back and of course the nameplate as well. And as far as that's concerned, I would guess that the numbers are probably going to be, I mean, the font could be different than the Kraken font, but I would imagine probably that same red as the logo in the front, then outlined in the off-white, and the name probably the off-white on the upper back on top of that dark blue shoulders that we see. Anyway, with all that being said, and as I kind of thought would be the case, even in spite of my positive but not overwhelming love for them right away, these jerseys really have started to grow on me even over this last day, the more and more that I look at them. As I said in the short, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, they do look like a pretty perfect combination of the Kraken's current look and that look of the Metropolitans. The red S in the middle with the text that now reads Kraken rather than Seattle, but the S still being the Kraken S even if it's all in red, and then outlined in that off-white to give it that retro feel. Of course, the barber pole stripes, which were very much an iconic part of those Metropolitan jerseys, this time in Kraken colors, and a few less stripes than the Metropolitans to not make it quite as gaudy looking, but still a nice retro feel to those stripes. They got the dark blue and that ice blue of the Kraken, as well as, again, those off-white ones to give it a little bit more retroness. The Metropolitans, they were white, but over time they become more of that off-white, obviously. All that to say that by the time I get my hands on one of these jerseys, which will be as soon as I physically can, I'm sure that I'm going to absolutely love them. And also at that time, I will be doing a full video, dedicated video breakdown on these Winter Classic jerseys, comparing them to a Metropolitans jersey I have, as well as the current Kraken jerseys, and a close-up look at them and all the stitching and other good details that you get in jerseys up close that you just won't be seeing in pictures like we see here. And yes, I will be getting a player name and number on it, so there will be that aspect in that video as well. I'm thinking it's probably going to be Yanni Gourde, but if you feel like I should get someone different, let me know down in the comments. But with that being the case and having that full dedicated video coming when I do get the jersey, I'll leave it here for now and leave it to you down in the comments section what you thought of this Kraken game against the Canucks, what you think of the jerseys for now until we get that video out, and just general excitement about the Kraken seemingly getting the ball rolling in the right direction, finally. Of course, we'll have to see what happens against especially the Flames and Sharks. There are definitely chances for some big letdowns there, but at least for now, we're feeling pretty good about it. And with that, as always, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel for free that I appreciate you using. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!